Let me text Chris real quick because I do not know how to give permission to record unless you guys know how to give.
If you go to the participants list and you click on Angel Rodriguez - Roma Venkateswaran, I think under more, you should be able to give me permission.
Okay. Let me text. So sorry. So go to participants and then find Angel, right?
Yes.
Okay, I think I just allowed it.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Brandon, are you the presiding judge?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make you the host of the meeting.
Great.
Okay, I'm going to be right back. Since there are no conflicts, don't start the round yet. I'll be back with the all clear.
Okay.
Okay, y'all are good to go ahead and start the round.
All right, great. All right, we will now call the case of the estates of Genesis Petrillo v. Peony Estates and Harper Martini. My name is Judge Cooper. Screen judge, please look to the left 2 buttons in your screen and make sure to keep your audio and video off unless told otherwise. Everyone should have their video set to hide non-video participants. Can the attorneys now make appearances? All right, plaintiff counsel, please make appearances.
Sorry about that. My camera up.
No problem.
Okay. Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Cinque Garza, and I, along with my co-counsels, Jas Valdezi.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And Hayden Tyner.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Represent Joey Petrillo as the administrator of the estate of Genesis Petrillo, pursuing the cause of action of battery against Harper Martini.
Good morning to you all. Defense.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Jessica Fernandez, and I am joined today by my co-counsel, Leslie Garcia.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And Razan Elsading, and we represent the defendants in today's case.
Good morning to you all. Plaintiff, please, if you have any pretrial matters, let's hear them now.
Yes. First, the plaintiff moves to invoke Rule 603, which states all witnesses have been pre-sworn prior to their testimony.
Will be invoked.
The plaintiff also moves to invoke Rule 615, which states that all witnesses are to be constructively sequestered.
Very good. It will be invoked.
What are Your Honor's preferences about movement during statements and examinations?
Free to move whenever you'd like for statements and examinations.
What are Your Honor's preferences about sharing our screen for evidentiary purposes? Would you like for us to ask permission?
Actually, no. I recognize the virtual environment. Feel free to share whenever you'd like. Of course, if a piece of evidence has not yet been entered, the jury will be constructively removed, and we will assume that they have not seen the evidence until it has been entered and published. But you're free to share exhibits for purposes of getting ready to enter them, or if they've already been entered, you can just put them up on the screen without asking permission. Just please note for the record, say something like, I'm now putting exhibit blank onto the screen.
May we assume all evidentiary arguments are heard outside the earshot of the jury?
Yes,
To note for the court, exhibits 1 through 10 are pre-admitted into evidence per stipulation 3.
that's fine. So you can put those on the screen anytime without asking.
May we assume that anything being screen shared beyond exhibits 1 through 10 is not published to the jury until it has been entered into evidence?
That's good. Yes.
With that, the plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Great. Anything from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. May we have a brief recess at the conclusion of the defense case in chief prior to the start of closing arguments?
Yeah, I'm going to leave that up to the timekeepers and team captains for each team. If we're running close to all loss, we might need to not do a break or do an abbreviated closing, but certainly if there's enough time for both parties to give a full closing argument, we will be able to have a recess. Yes.
At this time, the defense has no further pretrial matters and defense is ready to begin its case.
Great. Plaintiff, if you have an opening statement, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. The defendant walked in with poison and walked out with wine. This is Genesis Petrillo, and as you'll hear today, she was a beautiful young woman in the prime of her life. She was getting ready to marry her best friend and begin their lives together. But this dream was cut short when she drank the poisoned wine the night before her wedding and slipped into coma, passing away right as she was supposed to be zipping up her wedding dress and adjusting her veil and walking down the aisle. Members of the jury, what happened? The defendant, Harper Martini, Genesis' future mother-in-law, killed her. The defendant walked in with poison and walked out with wine, and now Genesis Petrillo is dead. The night before, Genesis had just received a bottle of wine named Cara from the defendant Harper Martini, Genesis' soon-to-be-in-law. Genesis just wanted to celebrate her night because she was about to get married, so she drank that bottle of Cara, but sip after sip, she started to get sick. And today you'll hear from Miss Petrillo's bridesmaid who saw Genesis get sick and then rushed her to the hospital. The bridesmaid will tell you how she waited and waited for some good news, but soon found out that Genesis was in a coma. The doctor who treated Genesis, Petrillo, will also take the stand to testify that the cause of Genesis' coma and eventual death was pesticide poisoning. The bridesmaid will also tell you how she rushed back to the wedding venue to get Genesis' fiance, Casey Soto. And Casey Soto will also take the stand to testify how she and her bridesmaid rushed back to the hospital only to find out that they were too late. Just 5 minutes before Casey arrived, Genesis had just died from pesticide poisoning. How did Genesis get pesticide poisoning? It's because the defendant walked in with poison and walked out with wine. Members of the jury, the evidence will show you that it was the defendant. And Casey Soto will tell you that the defendant, Genesis' future-in-law, never liked Genesis from the beginning, hated her even. And the bridesmaid will tell you about the constant fighting that occurred from the beginning all the way to the time of the wedding. And as a matter of fact, the bridesmaid saw the defendant with a canister of pesticides walking towards the kitchen. And when the bridesmaid asked the defendant, "What's that canister for?" the defendant will then reply that these pesticides are for Genesis because Genesis is such a pest. The defendant walked in with poison and walked out with wine. And that is why today we, as a plaintiff, are pursuing a complaint of battery against Harper Martini. We have to prove that the defendant took an action with intent to cause harm to Genesis. That is, that she intentionally put poison in the wine that ultimately caused Genesis' death. And we have to prove this to you today by a preponderance of evidence. That is, that it's more likely than not that the defendant committed battery against Genesis Petrillo. The defendant walked in with poison and walked out with wine. So at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Mr. Tyner, will come before you and review all the evidence that you heard today. And throughout this trial, I ask you to consider all the evidence with an open mind so that you'll be able to arrive to the truth. And when Mr. Tyner asks you to return with a verdict of liable, I anticipate that you'll be able to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Plaintiff Counsel. We will now hear openings from the defense. You can begin whenever you're ready.
May it please the court. Full hands and a full heart. A picture-perfect night. A room decorated in flowers and roses and laughter. All hosted by Harper Martini. The night quickly takes a detour to the emergency room. And Harper Martini, accused of killing his daughter-in-law, Genesis Petrillo. See, members of the jury, Harper Martini did no harm to Genesis Petrillo. The plaintiff has and will paint a completely different narrative. Today you'll hear the real story of Harper Martini. Good morning. My name is Razan El-Sadiq, and today I'll be representing Harper Martini alongside my co-counsel, Jessica Fernandez and Leslie Garcia. The plaintiff has sued Harper Martini under Midland's Pest and Pesticide Rule, also known as Rule 12-100. See, Harper Martini's story doesn't begin with her winery, Peony Estates. It begins long before. You'll learn today that Harper Martini's story actually begins with her grandparents, who met at a vineyard. From then, they decided to open up their very own. Harper Martini's parents grew up on that vineyard. And even later, Harper Martini herself grew up on that exact vineyard. The present. Miss Martini had her hands full with running her winery, but she also had her heart full as a single parent. See, Miss Martini has one child, Casey Soto, who she worked so hard to provide for, and yet she never missed a soccer game or a school play. Casey Soto was engaged to Genesis Petrillo. It was no secret Miss Martini and Genesis Petrillo didn't get along. After all, they were in-laws. But Miss Martini understood the fact that Genesis played a huge role in her daughter Casey's life. So on the night of June 7th, she gifted Petrillo with a bottle of Cara wine to prove to her daughter that she was worth more than any fee. See, members of the jury, if the plaintiff if Genesis Petrillo never died, but still took that trip to the hospital, the plaintiff would still be pursuing this case today. Today, we're not speaking on the grounds of guilty or not guilty. We're simply speaking on terms of liability. The defense has no burden of proof whatsoever, but the plaintiff has to prove every bit of their by preponderance of the evidence. In other words, they need to prove that Harper Martini needs to be held accountable for the harm suffered by Petrillo and the Petrillo family. And they won't be able to meet this burden today. First, Harper Martini herself. She'll tell you how she had her hands full with ensuring she got to see her daughter smile on her wedding day. And next, you'll hear from Blair Osborne, the party planner. She'll tell you how she had her hands full with ensuring everything went smoothly. And lastly, you'll hear from a Harvard graduate, Dr. R. Cannon. He'll tell you that Petrillo's death could have been due to several reasons, one even including alcohol poisoning. Today, we simply ask you to pay attention. Pay attention and listen. Listen how we may never know how Petrillo really died due to so many outside factors that have nothing to do with Harper Martini. Listen to how Harper Martini hoped this wedding would bring a new light to her winery. Today you'll learn that Harper Martini started her day of June 7th, 2019, much like how she lived the rest of her life, with her hands full and her heart full of joy and excitement for the new future to come. And when you find that the plaintiff is unable to meet their burden today, we ask you to find in favor of the defense and find Harper Martini not liable for the death of Genesis Petrillo. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Plaintiff, you can call your first witness.
Yes, we would like to call Angel Rodriguez to the stand.
All right. And counsel, you can begin when ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Namaste. My name is Angel Rodriguez. I'm a Gemini sun, which means I don't stick to the status quo. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a kindergarten teacher.
Do you know why you're in court here today?
Yes, one of my best friends, Genesis Petrillo, her soul passed to the next life.
Would you be able to recognize a picture of Genesis Petrillo?
Of course.
Let the record reflect that I'm showing the witness Exhibit 1. And let the record also reflect that Exhibit 1 has already been pre-entered due to Stipulation 3. Now, Miss Angel, what am I showing you?
That's a picture of Jen.
And does it look like a fair and accurate picture of the victim that, as you know her?
Yeah, it's almost like I can feel her energy through the picture.
So moving on, do you know the defendant in today's case?
Yes, I do. Miss Harper Martini. She was going to be Jen's mother-in-law because she's Casey, Jen's fiance's mom.
Now, to the best of your knowledge, what did you know about the relationship between the defendant and the victim?
Well, to my knowledge, if they were my students, it might be a relationship I'd put them in timeout for. Miss Martini was always criticizing Jen, and it seemed like she was always insulting Jen. It all seemed to culminate on the day of the rehearsal dinner.
Now, you mentioned the day of the rehearsal dinner. What happened on that day?
Oh, the energy in the venue that day just felt really dark. I heard Miss Martini and Genesis fighting all morning, and I heard Miss Martini even tell Jen to leave. She said, "Save this family a headache. Otherwise, I will make you disappear."
So what happened next?
I saw Jen try to talk to Miss Martini about it, but Miss Martini grabbed Jen's arm and yanked her into a hallway.
Now, to the best of your knowledge, do you know what happened in the hallway?
I don't really know. I tried to ask Jen about it, but she just told me, "I am afraid that Harper is going to kill me if I'm not careful."
Did you see the defendant ever again that day?
Yeah, I actually ran into her in the hallway when she was walking toward the kitchen holding a canister of pesticides.
What happened after you saw the defendant walking with a canister of pesticide?
I asked her what was going on, and she hesitated for a few seconds before she quickly said, "It's for Genesis, because Genesis is such a pest."
Objection, hearsay.
Yeah, response, plaintiff counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. This is an exclusion of hearsay as it goes to 801D2, admission by party opponent, as these statements that were elicited by was from Harper Martini.
Oh, yeah, overruled, defense counsel.
Now, moving on, did you see the defendant ever again that day?
Yeah, at the rehearsal dinner later that night, I saw her a couple of times. I remember seeing Miss Martini walk out with a bottle of wine, and she gave this bottle of wine to Genesis. It was a unique bottle that I hadn't seen before, labeled Cara.
Now, would you be able to recognize a picture of Kara if I were to show you in court here today?
Yes, I think so.
Let the record reflect that I'm showing the witness exhibit 2A and 2B in turn. Now, what am I showing you?
That looks like the bottle and the label that Miss Martini gave to Jen.
And has it been changed or altered in any way?
Not that I can see.
Now, let the record reflect that exhibit 2A and 2B has already been entered due to stipulation 3. Now, to your knowledge, do you know anyone that drank this wine?
I did see Jen drink the wine, but other than that, I didn't see anyone drink the wine other than me. I took a small sip, but I did not like it very much, so I spit it right out. I didn't swallow.
So what happened after the defendant gave the victim a bottle?
Jen got up to dance, but it seemed to me at that point that something was wrong.
Now, you said something was wrong. What do you mean by that?
Well, Jen and I have gotten drunk together a lot, so I've seen her tipsy and I've seen her blackout, but I hadn't ever seen her this out of it, you know?
What do you mean by this out of it?
It was so unusual because she hadn't even finished the bottle of Cara wine, and I had only seen her drink one, maybe two glasses of champagne other than that, but she was totally uncoordinated. Like, we were dancing to Thriller, and most of us were like, Thriller, Thriller. And Jen was like falling over, like, Thriller and Thriller. It was really weird.
So what did you do after you saw the victim dance to Thriller?
I asked Jen how she was feeling, and she told me this isn't a kind of feeling I've ever felt before.
So what happened next?
Oh, well, eventually we headed back upstairs. Drew and I helped Jen up the stairs, all for one and one for all. But it seemed like weird because Jen was stumbling and she seemed pretty drunk, but I couldn't smell any alcohol on her breath.
So what happened after you took the victim upstairs?
Well, that's when everything changed. Jen was vomiting so much, and I saw the light in her aura begin to dim. And then she passed out. And so I called 911 and the EMTs came and they were doing CPR on her body and they loaded her into this ambulance and we got rushed to the hospital.
Now, what happened at the hospital?
That's when I waited and I waited. I just wanted all to work, to just work this out, but the good news never came. The doctors told me in the morning that Jen had slipped into a coma.
What did you do after you heard that?
Well, I realized that I had to tell Casey, and so I rushed back to the wedding venue to try to find her.
Now, what happened at the wedding venue?
Actually, at the venue, I ran into Miss Martini, and our interaction was a little confusing.
Now, explain to the jury why the interaction was confusing.
I had been the only one at the hospital with Genesis, and I had tried to call Jen's parents, but they didn't pick up. So it was really weird when Miss Martini said, before I could even get anything out, Genesis got poisoned. Oh no, we'll have to cancel the wedding.
No more questions, Your Honor. I'll pass the witness.
All right, thank you, counsel. Defense, you may cross-examine when ready.
Good morning, Ms. Rodriguez.
Namaste.
So you met Casey and Genesis at a party, correct?
I believe so. It's been so long. But yeah, I think it was at a party.
And as time passed, you later became so close friends with Casey and Genesis, right?
Yeah, it's like the four of us, Casey, Jen, Drew, and I, we were all kind of like soul sisters. It's like I had known them in a past life or something.
So that's a yes to my question.
Yeah.
And you became so close that you were part of the wedding planning, correct?
Yes, I was a bridesmaid for both of the brides.
Okay, now let's fast forward to June 7th. There was a rehearsal and a rehearsal dinner that took place that day, right?
Yes.
And from that time forward, there were drinks involved, right?
Yes, at the rehearsal dinner, there were drinks.
And the day of June 7th, an hour later, around midnight, Genesis ordered tequila shots. Is that right?
Yeah, she was pretty uncoordinated by then, so she did order tequila shots, but I told her that she shouldn't.
So that's yes, correct?
Yeah, she ordered them against my wishes.
And then you personally noticed Genesis was slumped over, isn't that right?
Yeah, she had fallen asleep in her chair. I hadn't seen her drink any of the tequila, so I think she just passed out.
And for that matter, you assumed Genesis was drunk, correct?
Yeah, that's what I thought at the time, but I guess I was wrong.
And you did not share Genesis' conditions, correct?
No, I didn't want to worry Casey because I thought Jen was just drunk and I didn't want to make her worry on the night before her wedding.
And it took you about 30 minutes to take Genesis up to his room, right?
Yeah, Drew and I were helping Jen up the stairs, but she was stumbling a lot, so it took a while.
So would you say that Drew Masukas also had access to the pesticides and peonies states, right?
Objection, speculation.
Counsel, your
Your Honor?
response? Yes, yes.
Um, this witness is permitted to testify to her observations that took place during that event that was happening,
Okay.
that took place that day.
Yeah, can you repeat your question one more time, please?
Drew Masukas also had access to the pesticides and peony estates, right?
Okay. Plaintiff counsel, respond.
Your Honor, she is simply asking the witness to speculate on whether Drew had access or not. This witness does not know if Drew had access to a pesticide or not, therefore it's speculation under Rule 602.
Okay. Since it's cross-examination, if the witness doesn't know if Drew had access, I'm going to let her answer no or yes. So I'm going to overrule this objection. Defense counsel, you're free to ask your question. And Ms. Rodriguez, if you know or do not know, you're free to answer.
Yes, Your Honor.
Was Drew an employee at the Peony Estates, for Peony Estates?
From what I know, Drew was a tour guide, yes.
Okay, so I want to fast forward a little bit. So it took you, you didn't call emergency services before you noticed Genesis worsening conditions, is that right?
Yeah, I called 911 after her aura began to dim, and then when she lost consciousness, I called.
In fact, you called 911 right after Genesis had passed out, correct?
Yes.
And despite Genesis' conditions, you did not want to mention anything to Casey, right?
No, it was also hectic, and I thought, maybe they were just gonna like pump her stomach or something, and then we could all come home and have a good wedding. I didn't want to make Casey worried.
So that's a no to my question, correct?
I didn't tell Casey.
Okay, therefore you waited until after Genesis slipped into coma to tell Casey, right?
Yeah, it was at that point that I realized that I I had to, no matter how much I hoped and asked the universe for something different. This was going to be bad.
And by the time Casey got to the hospital, it was already too late, wasn't it?
It was. I should have told her. I should have told Casey. And I just thought that maybe something different would happen. But if I had told her earlier, maybe she could have been there in time.
So that's a yes to my question.
Yeah. Jen had already died by the time Casey and I got to the hospital.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, any redirect from this witness?
No redirect is needed, Your Honor. I just ask if the witness could be excused.
Certainly. Goodbye, Ms. Rodriguez.
Namaste.
And plaintiff counsel, you can call your next witness and proceed whenever you're ready.
The plaintiff calls Dr. Jimin Kwan.
Welcome, Dr. Kwan.
Thank you.
And you can proceed with direct.
Please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Jimin Kwan.
Why are you here today?
I was the attending physician at River Valley Hospital on June 8th, 2019, so I was the doctor that diagnosed and treated Ms. Petrillo on the night of her death.
What exactly do you do for a living?
Well, I'm the chief emergency physician at my hospital, so it's my job to assess the patients that walk into the emergency room and provide an initial diagnosis to guide their treatment.
And when were you educated for this?
I went to medical school at UNC Chapel Hill, and I completed my residency and my fellowship at Emory.
Can you tell the court a little about your work experience since then?
Of course, I've been working as an emergency physician in various levels across Midlands hospitals for almost 17 years now. The last promotion that I got was in 2015, and I've been the chief emergency physician ever since then.
Regarding this case in particular, doctor, what exactly did you examine?
My patient, Genesis Petrillo.
What evidence did you rely on in conducting your examination?
Of course, I examined the patient's physical body and any reports she made about her symptoms to me, about what she was feeling and when. I also looked at her toxicology reports, her death certificate, and other relevant exhibits like that.
Was this sufficient for you to reach your conclusions?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
What about your methods, doctor? How did you reach your conclusions?
In the emergency room, the pressure is on. We have to make tough calls and initial diagnoses quickly so that we can get the proper care to patients that are in this emergency state. The method that we use to do this is called the symptoms complex method of differential diagnosis. All that this means is that we look at symptoms in groups instead of focusing on individual symptoms. Take this as an example. If somebody walks into my emergency room and complains of a headache, with that individual symptom, I could diagnose them with stress, the flu, or even something as serious as a brain aneurysm. But if we look at the symptom complex, all the symptoms as a whole, we see that they have a headache, a fever, and a stuffy nose. So we know that this diagnosis is going to be more in the realm of the flu. This is an efficient and reliable way to work this out, to diagnose patients and guide the direction of their treatment.
Is this method reliable?
You can bet on it. It has been peer reviewed. It has been tested. It is the gold standard in our field, and all the doctors at the hospital that I know use it without any problems.
And were you able to reliably apply the facts and data of today's case to your method?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
So walk us through what happened when the victim arrived at your emergency room.
This is when I begin the diagnosis process and first take note of the patient's initial symptoms and try to get that first symptom complex.
What were these symptoms?
Symptoms reflecting intoxication. The patient smelled of wine and exhibited symptoms such as slurred speech, nausea, and vomiting. She also had trouble responding to my questions, which was another important symptom, but she did manage to inform me that she had been drinking that night.
And what was your initial response to this assessment?
Well, at this point, we have our first symptom complex, and this symptom complex seemed to be indicative of alcohol poisoning.
What did you do?
I admitted to the patient to the hospital and I conducted a full examination. It's here at this stage that we either confirm our initial diagnosis and move forward with that treatment plan, or we uncover more clues as to what's really going on with the patient. You can't just stick to the status quo in the emergency room. You have to be flexible in your initial diagnoses.
What did your examination reveal?
I managed to uncover several symptoms that were actually inconsistent with alcohol poisoning, and that did cause me to ultimately amend my initial diagnosis. Instead of having dilated pupils and the rapid pulse that are so common with alcohol poisoning cases, Miss Petrio's pupils were severely contracted and her pulse was very slow. She was also experiencing involuntary muscle spasms, incontinence, and respiratory constriction to the point that it was very difficult for her to get oxygenated air from her lungs to the rest of her body and her brain. This whole symptom complex that we then had was very uncommon in alcohol poisoning cases.
What was your next step?
Because this complex is so uncommon in alcohol poisoning cases, I ordered a toxins analysis because I began to suspect organophosphate poisoning, which is caused by the presence of pesticides in the body. These are very dangerous chemicals that can be lethal in even the smallest of doses, so I couldn't afford to wait until the test results came back. It was at this point that I decided to administer an antidote to the poison in an attempt to save the patient's life. It was now or never at this point.
Did the antidote work?
The effects of the poison had progressed to the point that the patient was unable to be saved. It had gotten to her lungs and caused pulmonary symptoms, causing her bronchial muscles to contract, making it so that oxygen really couldn't get to her brain. After I administered the antidote, the poison progressed further to the nervous system, which caused neurological distress, and that caused Miss Petrio to suffer a seizure and fall into a coma, and she never regained consciousness from that. And she passed early the next morning around 9:30.
What did you determine the cause of death to be?
Organophosphate poisoning for two reasons. Between the symptoms that I observed and the toxicology reports when they came back from the lab, I was confident that this was the correct diagnosis, and I wrote that on her death certificate.
Would you recognize those toxicology results and death certificate if I showed them to you today?
Yes, ma'am, I would.
Let the record reflect that I am approaching the witness with what has already been pre-admitted as Exhibits 6 and 7. Do you recognize these documents, doctor?
Yes, I do. It's the patient's toxicology report results and the death certificate that I filled out.
Are these clear and accurate copies of these documents?
Yes, ma'am.
So how did you use these to confirm your diagnosis?
Well, if we look at the toxicology results, they confirm our diagnosis. They came back positive for organophosphate poisoning. It says so right here under the positive flagged results.
Objection, hearsay.
Yeah, plaintiff counsel response.
May I ask what's hearsay?
Defense counsel, can we clarify?
Yes, Your Honor. Although that this information is what the witness conclusions are, it's still an out-of-court statement.
Plaintiff counsel, is this document what the witness is referring to, or defense counsel, is there a different statement that you're talking about as hearsay that's not on what we see on the screen, the little piece of paper?
Your Honor, the statement as a whole is a hearsay.
May I respond?
Yes.
This document has already been admitted into evidence under stipulation 3.
That was my understanding as well. I'm going to overrule the objection.
So how did you use these to confirm your diagnosis?
Like it says on the toxicology results, it says that her body had organophosphates in it. So that did confirm my diagnosis of organophosphate poisoning.
And were these tests able to determine how pesticides ended up in Genesis Petrio's body?
In a way, they made it so I was able to find what I'd been looking for. We tested everything that we could to identify the vehicle for the poison, but none of the food in her stomach tested positive for organophosphates. And the only things left after we tested the food remnants were the wine and the poison. Because of this, I was able to conclude that the organophosphate entered her body most likely via the wine.
Thank you, doctor. No further questions. I pass the witness.
Defense, you can cross-examine whenever you're ready.
Dr. Kwan, you typically make the diagnoses at the hospital, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And that when Petrillo came in, he smelled of wine.
Yes, she did smell like wine.
And that she appeared to be intoxicated.
That's correct.
And she was able to convey somehow that she was drinking a lot that evening. Is that right?
Yes, it was pretty difficult for her to communicate, but we did manage to get that understanding from her.
And some of the symptoms she experiences, vomiting a deep red color.
Yes.
She also had some stomach cramps, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Tightness in the chest.
Yes, ma'am, that was one of the symptoms that we saw as her condition devolved.
Slurred speech.
Yes, ma'am.
She was also unable to walk, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you concluded that all of these aligned with alcohol poisoning, is that right?
Initially, yes, that is correct.
And then a symptom that Petrillo experienced was that she was crying, is that right? Or tearing?
Yes, she did exhibit excessive tearing in her eyes. Like you said, that just means a lot of water's coming out of them.
But she could have been crying, is that correct?
It's entirely possible. What I noticed was liquid leaking from the tear ducts. Whatever the cause of it, that was
yes
what.
To my question.
Yeah, it's possible.
And you concluded that pesticides were the cause of Petrillo's death, is that right?
That's correct.
But you concluded this before the test results came back, is that right?
That's correct, but then the test results confirmed my suspicions.
Is that a yes to my question?
Yes.
And moving on, just because pesticides were in the body doesn't mean he ingested it orally, is that right?
That's true. There are other ways that the poison could have entered her body.
And it could have been absorbed through the skin, is that correct?
That's a possibility. I find it unlikely, but it is possible.
So is this a yes to my question?
It's possible, yes.
It could have been inhaled, is that right?
Again, unlikely, but possible, yes.
And although you were able to fully rule out contact poisoning, rule out contact poisoning, is that correct?
Yes, I believe that the most likely method of poison entering the body was through oral ingestion.
I'll get to that in a sec. But you weren't able to fully rule out inhalation poisoning, is that right?
That's correct, but again, still very unlikely.
Is that a yes to my question?
Yes.
And you can't confidently say that pesticides were in the wine bottle that caused Petrillo's death, is that right?
I cannot say that for 100% certainty. I can just tell you what my conclusions were. That's correct.
It could have been something she ate that night, is that right?
Unlikely, but possible, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor. I pass this witness.
Counsel, any redirect examination for Dr. Kwan?
No, Your Honor. I just asked my witness to step down.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Kwan.
Thank you.
And plaintiff, feel free to call your third witness and you can proceed whenever you're ready.
Plaintiff calls Casey Soto to the stand.
Welcome, Casey Soto.
Okay. Introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Casey Soto.
Would you prefer that I call you Casey, or is Miss Soto fine?
Casey's fine.
Okay. Casey, I understand that you suffered a loss. If you need a moment at any point in my questioning, let me know. Why are you here today, Casey?
Well, I'm not here voluntarily. Quite frankly, my future and everything that I cared about died on June 7th, 2019. I don't really care about anything anymore, so.
Could you tell me how you and Genesis met?
Yes, of course. Me and Genesis actually met at a party at Rosie and Pedro Winery. We hit off immediately and officially started dating about a month later. We had been inseparable since. That is until now.
How was your relationship with Genesis?
Our relationship was amazing. I mean, sparks all the time. She was so bold and she brought out the best in me, you know? She was always the life of the party. She had actually proposed to me, even though I was planning on doing so. I guess she was just as excited to start our lives together as I was.
Now, Casey, how did the wedding planning go?
It was going pretty well. That was until my mother got involved. Me and Genesis were trying to make this wedding about us and us alone, but my mom had other plans. Genesis and my mom would just constantly argue all the time just about the venue and catering. It would get so ridiculous that sometimes I would just have to leave the room.
But did the relationship seem to get any better before the wedding?
No, not at all. Actually, it seemed to get worse. My mom had been under the impression that I was going to be taking over Peony Estates, which I had no intent on doing. You know, I had to go my own way, and me and Genesis were planning on moving to France after the wedding.
And did the defendant know about this plan to move?
Yes, she did.
How did she react to that plan?
Well, I wasn't planning on telling my mom so soon. I was actually trying to wait to tell her after we were far enough away in France so that she couldn't really do anything about it. But she found out through a voicemail. And my mom had actually told Genesis in an upset rage, whether you stay with Casey, move off to France, or end up 6 feet under, I don't care. But Casey is staying here. I told Genesis that what my mom had said wouldn't change anything. Me and Genesis were all in this together, and I loved her.
Now, Casey, I'd like to talk about the day of the wedding rehearsal. How did the rehearsal go?
Everything seemed to have gone back to normal. Genesis and Harper were avoiding each other, which was best for everybody. Genesis was beautiful, as always. Naturally, things got pretty tense with the initial speeches and Harper saying, "You don't get to choose who your children marry, unfortunately." Then later, my mom brought Genesis up in front of everybody and gave her a bottle of wine, specifically for Genesis.
How did the night wrap up for you?
Well, I went to bed pretty early. I wanted to be well rested for the big day, and Genesis said she would stay up a little bit later and mingle with the guests as she is a night owl. So I kissed her goodnight, and I'm sorry, that was actually the last time I saw her alive. So.
What did you do when you woke up the next morning, Casey?
Well, I was getting ready for the wedding. I was, getting into my dress and getting ready for the amazing life I was about to spend with my Genesis. And then my mom came in and told me that Genesis was nowhere to be found. I blew her off. I just assumed that Genesis was using the restroom, but boy, was I wrong. Angel.
Wow. Oh, sorry.
Angel came into my room and she described to me where Genesis had gone. Something about Genesis and coma and pesticide. I don't know exactly what she said, to be honest. I was just in such a rush to get to the hospital.
Did you make it to the hospital in time to see Genesis?
No, I was 5 minutes too late. God, what I would give to get those 5 minutes back. I never got to say goodbye.
No further questions. I pass the witness.
Thank you, counsel. Defense, you can begin with cross-examination whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Soto, first I'd like to say I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and if you could stick with a yes or no answer, that would be great. So you met Genesis Petrillo in 2012, right? Yes, May of 2012. And when you guys met, Genesis was pretty tipsy. Yeah, we were at a party, so. Despite this, you and Genesis immediately hit things off, right? Oh yeah, she was amazing. I don't know how I couldn't have. So eventually you took her to meet Harper Martini, your only parent. I was trying to hold off because Harper can be a big personality, but eventually, yes, I decided they should meet because Genesis was the love of my life. Right. When Genesis and Harper met, Genesis insulted Peony Estates wine. Genesis did not know that my mom was the owner of Peony Estates. So yeah, she had her opinion about the wine. Right. That's something you failed to mention to Harper Martini, right? I'm sorry, that's something you failed to mention to Angel Rodriguez, that Harper Martini was the owner of Peony Estates. To Angel? To Genesis, I'm sorry. Yes, I failed to have mentioned that initially. In fact, you actually think it's your fault that Harper and Genesis started off on the wrong foot. Yeah, slightly. Now let's fast forward to 2018. Genesis proposed to you, right? Yes, she did. And actually, this caught Harper off guard. Yeah, Genesis hadn't told Harper about her plans on proposing. Regardless, Harper Martini still offered to fund a large portion of your wedding, right? Well, she wanted it to be at her winery for advertising purposes, so. But Harper Martini still wanted this to be a picture-perfect wedding. Like I said, she wanted it to be at her wedding for advertising purposes, so I'm sure she wanted it not only for me, but also for the wedding to make business be booming as usual. Now let's fast forward to May. In May 11th, 2019, you, Genesis, and other members of the wedding party went to Black Bear Casino, right? Yes, we did. And everyone was pretty drunk. Yeah, I mean, we were having a good time. However, a few days later, Harper played you a voicemail. Genesis left, right? Yes, it was a pretty hasty voicemail, I will admit. And in this voicemail, Genesis was clearly drunk. I mean, yeah, she was slurring her speech a little bit. Now, based on what you remember, Genesis was throwing up the night at the Black Bear Casino, right? Yes, she did get a little sick. She ended up getting pretty sick, right? Yes, she did. But despite this voicemail that Genesis Petrillo left, Harper still continued to move on with the wedding planning, right? Yes, she did. And let's fast forward to the night of the rehearsal. At some point in the night, Harper made a big show of giving a wine bottle to Genesis, right? Yes, she did. And this meant a lot to you, right? Yeah, it seems like a pretty genuine gesture of my mom to do that for Genesis. Because up to this point, Genesis and Harper had been arguing, right? Yes, incessantly. After Genesis received the bottle of wine, Genesis poured herself 2 glasses of wine, right? Well, I don't know if the second glass was for her or not, but she did pour 2 glasses. Right, but you wouldn't be surprised if both glasses were for her, right? I mean, I guess not, no. because this wouldn't be the first time you had seen Genesis pour 2 glasses of wine just for herself.
No, it wouldn't have.
Well, eventually, you headed up to bed.
Yes, I wanted to be well rested for the wedding.
And Genesis opted out to stay out a little longer to mingle and drink, right?
Yes, she did.
And this was the last time you'd seen her alive, right?
Yeah, it was.
I know this is hard for you, and if you need a second to collect yourself, I understand. But I just have a couple more questions. On the morning of your wedding, you were informed by Angel that Genesis was in a coma, right?
Yes, Angel came to my room and told me where she had gone.
But by the time you got to the hospital, it was already too late, right?
5 minutes to be exact.
I'm so sorry for your loss again. In your honor, I passed the witness.
Counsel, plaintiff, any redirect from this witness?
No, Your Honor, I ask that the witness be allowed to step down.
Certainly. Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Soto.
Yeah.
At this
All right,
time,
and
at
go
this
ahead,
time,
counsel.
rests our case in chief and asks for a 5-minute recess if time permits.
That's great. We'll have a 5-minute recess, and let's be back at 11:21. Right, I believe about 5 minutes has elapsed. Plaintiff counsel, is everyone back?
Yes, Your Honor, I believe everyone is back. And the defense is ready to proceed.
Great. Defense, please call your first witness.
The defense calls Harper Martini.
And you may proceed whenever you're ready.
Please state your name for the court.
My name is Harper Martini.
And Ms. Martini, what do you do for a living?
Well, I'm the owner and founder of Peony Estates Winery and B&B here in Midlands.
How long has it been open?
Oh, about 5 years now. I got the funds for it in January of 2015.
Did you have any prior experience at all?
Sure, winery making has always been in my blood. My great-grandparents worked in the Napa Valley, and my grandparents and my parents, and I even worked there for a bit. I just figured I'd get into the winery business at some point.
And do you have any children, Ms. Martini?
Yes, I have one daughter, Casey Soto. She's the sun to my planet. She's my only child. I love her so much.
Could you tell me a bit about your relationship with her?
Yeah, so it's always been me and her. Her father died shortly after, before Casey was born, but it's always just been me and her together. I've been busy with the winery, but I've attended every soccer game, every school play she's been in. We were pretty close.
And I know this might be a little hard for you, but could you tell me about who was Genesis Petrillo?
Yes, so Genesis was Casey's fiance.
And how was your relationship with her?
Quite frankly, it was pretty rough. The first time we met, she kind of insulted my wine here I make at Peony Estates, which hurt my feelings, but it was the way that she just said it. She was like, yeah, Rosie's and Pedro's is better. That just hurt my feelings so much.
Objection, hearsay.
Defense counsel response.
Your Honor, this is present tense and impression. She's simply stating how she felt before.
What was the specific statement?
She stated that Petrillo insulted her winery.
Okay, plaintiff counsel response.
Did you say it was under present sense impression?
Yes.
So if I may direct the court's attention to Rule 803.1 for the exceptions to the rule on hearsay, present sense impression requires a temporal connection that defense counsel has not yet established.
Okay, I agree with that. I don't see that there is a temporal connection, as you mentioned. Counsel for defense, if you can lay that foundation, feel free to re-ask the question. But if any statement from the witness has actually gotten out at this point, I'm going to go ahead and strike that and sustain the objection. Defense counsel, you can proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. I'll re-ask the question. Have you ever tried, what was your relationship like with Genesis?
Quite frankly, it was pretty rough. I mean, we had several issues together. Genesis wasn't a fan of my winery. He said it was just a fancy glass box and insulted the food we had at the bread and breakfast. And
Objection, hearsay again on the statements of Genesis Petrillo.
Yep, defense counsel response.
Yes, Your Honor. This is admission by party opponent. She's simply stating what Genesis Petrillo stated tonight.
Counsel response.
Yeah, my response, Your Honor, is that Genesis is not the opponent today. It's the estates of Joey Petrillo.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Defense counsel, any other response?
Yes, Your Honor. It's under 803.3. It's the then existing mind.
And what is this state of mind of the declarant?
That she felt insulted.
Yeah, I don't think that's the state of mind of the declarant. That's the state of mind of this witness who's hearing the statement. So I'm going to sustain the objection and strike the testimony of Miss Martini.
All right. Yes, Your Honor. I'll move on. And have you ever tried building a better relationship with her?
Absolutely. I mean, I knew how important she was to Casey, and I tried several attempts to improve our relationship. I invited her to a brunch event so we could get to know one another better and try and bury the hatchet between us.
And what did you discuss during this brunch?
We were just kind of discussing plans for the wedding, and I had mentioned that Casey agreed to have the wedding at Peony Estates, and she seemed really surprised. She mentioned, she's like, oh, is this because of the move? And I didn't know what they were talking about, so I was just really surprised about that.
And what move were they referring to?
Well, I found out later, Genesis had given me a drunk voicemail call, and she mentioned that they were moving to France because she had gotten a job there. And Casey
Objection,
and
per
her
se.
were moving.
Response, defense.
Yes, Your Honor. This is simply, she was simply stating that she was worried about Genesis Petrillo was simply stating that it's not necessarily used for the truth, but rather the effect on the listener, regardless if the move was real or not. It still shocked her.
Counsel, let me ask you this first, defense counsel. Is this statement from a document that is in evidence or anything like that, or is this just something that she's hearing?
Yes, it's in evidence.
What document is that? And I have the evidence in front of me, so if that's, I can pull up the exhibit myself.
Your Honor, it's Exhibit 8.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. As long as the statements that this witness is talking about are from this exhibit, plaintiff counsel, I'm going to overrule the objection. If they're talking about things outside this exhibit, feel free to re-raise an objection. But it was my understanding that this is where that came from. So objection overruled. Counsel, you can proceed.
And I'll repeat my question. How did you feel about this move?
I was first shocked that Casey and Genesis were keeping such a big thing from me, but also primarily I was just worried about Casey. Her entire life was here in Midlands, and now she's moving all the way across the world to Paris, France. I was just worried for her. I didn't want her wasting her life.
Moving on, from your perspective, how was Genesis and Casey's relationship?
Casey always described it to me as being kind of picture perfect, how Genesis allowed her to express her fun side more. I never saw anything bad about it. I was just kind of worried. I thought Genesis might have been a bad influence.
And did anything reassure your worries? Were you worried about anything else?
Sure. I remember this one occasion where Genesis had dared Casey to drink an entire case of one of our vintage wines, and Casey ended up in the hospital with alcohol poisoning. It was then that I kind of figured that Genesis might not be the best influence on Casey.
Objection, hearsay.
Response, defense.
Your Honor, may I ask what was hearsay?
Yeah, plaintiff counsel, please clarify what was the statement.
The statement was that Genesis dared Casey to drink an entire case of Peonia Estates wine. That is
Okay.
a out-of-court statement being offered for the truth. So it is hearsay.
Got it. Defense counsel.
Your Honor, although that there was no, my witness never mentioned, she just simply mentioned an event that occurred, not necessarily words or phrases that happened.
Yeah, plaintiff counsel.
If this is not based on a statement, then I'd amend. If this is not a direct statement, then I'd amend my objection to lack of personal knowledge, because the only way that Harper Martini would know this would be based on some kind of hearsay statement.
Yeah, we're just going to leave it at the hearsay.
Okay.
I don't think any particular statement was mentioned, and I think that is something that the witness can get her opinion off of based on what she observed. So I'm going to overrule this objection.
And moving on to the night of the rehearsal dinner, could you tell me a bit more about the gift you gave Genesis that night?
Sure. I gave her the first ever bottle of our 2019 Cara wine.
And could you tell me why specifically did you give this Cara wine?
For several reasons, honestly. One, it was a labor of love on both my part and Casey's part. Casey played a huge role in designing the label for the wine, and she even came up with the name Cara wine. And as for my part, it was a new blend, unique blend of like fall flavors and spices and stuff. And I knew it was exactly the type of wine I had seen Genesis fawning over during a tasting we had with Sam Arnold. I knew exactly the type of wine that Genesis would like. So I thought, what better way to bury a hatchet than give her a first bottle of our brand new wine.
And could you tell me about how Genesis reacted when you gave him that wine?
Quite honestly, I will admit, I didn't really look at her reaction. I was focusing more on Casey, who I had seen over her shoulder, and Casey was just having the biggest smile on her face.
And lastly, Miss Martini, did you kill Genesis Petrillo?
No, I could never do that. I mean, sure, me and Genesis had our differences, but it was quite petty things. I would never harm Genesis like that. Losing Genesis would be like losing Casey. I knew how important they were to each other. I would never harm Casey like that.
Thank you, Miss Martini. No further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
Counsel, plaintiff, you can cross-examine whenever you're ready.
Ms. Martini, you gave Genesis an envelope, isn't that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And there was a note in that envelope?
Yes, I had.
You'd recognize that note if you saw it here in court today?
Yes, I would.
Permission to tender to opposing counsel and the witness what has been marked as Exhibit 24.
Yeah, remember, you don't have to ask. Just whenever you're entering evidence, if it hasn't already been entered, then ask for.
I'll wait for a second until Exhibit 24 comes on the screen. There it is. Ms. Martini, this is the note you wrote to Genesis, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
That's your handwriting on the note?
Yes.
And you signed the bottom of the note with your initials, HM, correct?
Yes, I had.
This is an accurate picture of the note?
Yes, it is.
Hasn't been changed or altered in any way?
Not to my knowledge, no.
At this time, plaintiff offers Exhibit 24 into evidence.
Objection, hearsay.
Response, plaintiff.
This is an exclusion to hearsay under 801D2, admission by party opponent.
Yeah. Defense, is there any doubt to the authenticity of this note being from Harper Martini?
No, Your Honor.
All right, the objection is overruled. Exhibit 24 will be admitted.
Now, Ms. Martini, in this note, you wrote, "Leave Casey and the enclosed $300,000 is yours." Isn't that right?
Yes, it is. I did it as a test to see how Genesis would react, honestly.
There was a check in the envelope with the note, wasn't there?
Yes, there was.
And this check was for $300,000?
Yes, that's correct.
And in this note, you also wrote, "Otherwise, I will take you out of the picture the hard way. Don't make it come to that. You have till the 7th." I read that right, didn't I?
Yes, you did. And by all that I meant by that was just I would tell Casey that she chose money over her.
Now, June 7th was the day of the wedding rehearsal, isn't that right?
Yes.
Let's talk about the wedding rehearsal then. Genesis was nearly 15 minutes late for the wedding rehearsal.
Yes, she was.
And that bothered you, didn't it?
Yes, I thought it was pretty disrespectful, especially since it was both of their big days.
Yeah. And you saw that note that you wrote to Genesis again on June 7th, didn't you?
Yes.
You saw it because, yeah, you saw it because Genesis brought it to the rehearsal.
Yes, I believe so.
She put the note back in the envelope.
Yes.
She threw the envelope back in your face.
Yes, she has.
But she kept the check, though.
Yes, she did.
So you went to the wine cellar?
Well, yeah, to grab the bottle of the Cara wine that I was going to give her.
Yeah, and you brought that bottle of Cara wine upstairs to the main kitchen.
Yes, that's true.
You told the caterer that the Cara bottle was for Genesis.
Yeah, it was her wedding gift from me.
And you were here when the bridesmaid testified, correct?
Yes, I was.
And you heard her testify that she ran into you in the hallway later that evening
Yes, that's true.
after Genesis threw the envelope in your face?
That is correct. Yes.
And you heard her testify that she saw you walking towards the kitchen,
Yes, that's true.
holding a canister of pesticides.
Yes.
Now, later that evening, you gave the bottle of Cara to Genesis
Yes, I did.
during the toast you gave.
Yes, at 10 p.m. that evening.
Each member of the wedding party was given a bottle of wine.
Yes, our 2017 Horizon wine.
Right. Everyone else received Horizon wine.
Yes,
Except
that's
Genesis.
true.
Genesis got Cara wine, right?
Yeah, it was supposed to be special. It was a labor of love on both mine and Casey's part.
Right. Ms. Martini, on June 7th, 2019, you were aware that mixing pesticides with wine could be fatal?
Yes, I was aware. I mean, as a winery owner, I know of the harmful effects of pesticides.
You knew that the pesticides used at your winery could not be seen when mixed in wine?
Objection.
That is,
Improper opinion.
Elaborate on that. What's the improper opinion?
Improper expert opinion, excuse me.
Okay. Plaintiff counsel.
Yes, if I may proffer,
Go ahead.
there is a specific incident in which the defendant sees someone drinking wine with pesticides mixed in it, and that employee nearly dies from drinking that wine.
Okay. What was the question?
My question was, you knew that pesticides used at your winery could not be seen when mixed in wine.
Yeah, I don't think that really requires an expert opinion. I think that's within the scope of her lay witness perception. So I'm going to overrule that objection.
Ms. Martini, you knew that pesticides could not be seen when mixed in wine,
yes, I did know that.
and you knew that these pesticides could not be smelled when mixed in wine.
Yes, I just thought that was really, really dangerous.
You left the wedding rehearsal around 10:30 p.m., right?
Yes, that's correct. I wanted to get ready for tomorrow.
And you got a call the next morning?
Yes, around 2 a.m. by Austin Lewis.
So it was from one of your employees.
Yes,
This employee told you that someone had been rushed to the hospital?
yes, that's true.
Yes or no, did the employee tell you who had been rushed to the hospital?
I don't believe they specified a name.
You didn't go to the hospital?
At the time, no.
You didn't check who had been hospitalized?
No, I hadn't.
But you thought it might be Genesis, didn't you?
I mean, she was one of the most important members of the wedding party for the next day, so I just wanted to make sure that she was okay.
I'm going to refer you back to my question, Miss Martini. Yes or no, did you think that it might have been Genesis?
I didn't think it might be her, but that was my first thought because I knew Casey was sleeping. So I just wanted to make sure she was okay.
Was that a yes or a no to my question?
It was both. Primarily, I didn't think it was Genesis that was in the hospital. I just wanted to check and make sure that Genesis was safe in her room.
Well, you did go back to sleep after that, didn't you?
Yes, after I went to Genesis' room, I did go back to sleep.
You talked to Angel Rodriguez later that morning?
Yes, she had informed me that. Well, yes.
It was around 9 a.m.?
Yes.
And it was at that time that Angel told you that Genesis had slipped into a coma?
Yes, she did.
Miss Martini, you've mentioned that you thought Genesis was a bad influence on Casey.
Yes, I mean, I knew she drinks a lot, and again, she had dared Casey to drink a whole case of our vintage wine.
But you also thought Genesis was bad for business.
Yes, I had mentioned earlier, she would talk to the guests and talk about how terrible our food was and just make fun of Peony Estates as a whole.
And you thought that business would be better if Genesis were somehow out of the picture?
Out of the picture, meaning she wasn't interacting and talking bad about us to the guests, then yes.
You thought that business would be better if Genesis were out of your lives.
I mean, if she had no reason to hang out with Casey, then she wouldn't really hang out around Peony Estates. So, yes.
Ms. Martini, you're happy that Genesis is no longer in your lives?
Objection.
No.
Speculation.
Plaintiff counsel response.
This is the witness's own mindset, so I'm not asking the witness to delve into anyone else's mindset.
Yeah, I think the question was you are happy, so I'm going to overrule the objection.
Ms. Martini, you're happy that Genesis is no longer in your lives?
No, quite frankly, I'm not, because she was the love of Casey's life, and Casey's devastated now. I would never want that harm on Casey. So, no, I'm not happy she's dead.
Well, part of you is happy that Genesis is no longer in your lives.
I will admit to that. Yeah, she was bad for business.
No further questions. I pass the witness.
Plaintiff, defense, any redirect examination for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly.
Okay, you can proceed.
Ms. Martini, you weren't the only one who had access to the cellar, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. All of my other employees had it, like Austin Lewis, Drew Matsukas, Kirby Doolittle. All of my employees had access.
Objection outside the scope of my cross.
Yeah, defense response to that.
Opposing counsel has mentioned that pesticide, that she went to the cellar and grabbed a bottle of Cara wine, indicating that she had access to the cellar.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to overrule the objection.
No further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
All right, any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, all right. Ms. Martini, you may be excused. And defense, feel free to call your next witness.
Yes, at this time we call Blair Osborne.
Great. We're ready, and you can proceed whenever you're ready.
Can you please state your name to the court?
Ho, ho, howdy there, partner. Name is Osborne, Blair Osborne. Pleasure to make your acquaintance. And I know it's just Thanksgiving, but I'm just a huge fan of the holidays.
Mr. Osborne, what do you do for a living?
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about myself. I am the sole CEO, CFO, and all other executive roles as founder and owner of Bliss by Blair Events, now offering 10% discount due to the late Jens Petrillo.
Mr. Osborne, why are you here today?
Oh, I do have to say with great regret that I was the one that planned the wedding and associated matrimonial events of Casey Soto and the late Jancis Patricio, God bless her soul. And I was in Peonia Estates on the day of the untimely death of Jancis Patricio.
Can you tell us when you met Harper Martini?
Oh, I believe I had the pleasure of getting acquainted with my good friend Miss Martini and her child in the spring of 2015. What a beautiful spring it was.
How long have you been working with Peonia Estates?
Oh, I gotta say, and I gotta tell another thing about myself. Back when I started, I wasn't all too good at this, if I may say so myself. One day I double booked a wedding and a birthday, and I was just about to have my whole company collapse until I was rescued by the one and only Miss Martini 4 years ago.
Now let's talk about your involvement with the wedding. How did you end up planning the wedding for Casey and Genesis?
Well, my good friend Miss Martini came up to me, approached me, and asked me to plan and coordinate Casey and Genesis wedding festivities for the October 6, 2018. I could have not been more thrilled. Say yes, they're like family to me.
Objection to hearsay.
Defense counsel response.
Yes. Can opposing counsel be a little bit more specific as to what statement?
Yeah, plaintiff, what was the
Yes.
statement?
Hearsay on the statements about Harper Martini asking Blair Osborne to plan the wedding.
Response, defense.
Your Honor, this is a question, therefore it's not hearsay.
Agreed. Overruled.
Let me repeat the question. How did you end up planning the wedding for Casey and Genesis?
Well, I got the great opportunity with my good friend Miss Martini came up to me, asked me to plan and coordinate Casey and Genesis festivities on October 6, 2018. I could have not been more thrilled to say yes, because I love them like I love my own family.
Now, were Casey and Genesis aware that you were planning the wedding?
Well, let me say this, not so quite at first. Although I was assured that Casey would come around having me plan her wedding. I mean, look at me, I'm so jolly. Who wouldn't want me to plan their wedding? So Miss Martini asked me to keep things in confidence, and Blair Osborne follows his promises. So I said, I kept it quiet until I officially met, Miss Soto and Miss Petrillo in January 12, 2019.
Can you tell us what it was like working with Harper, Casey, and Genesis?
Good heavens, let me tell you. Casey and Genesis were delightful two peas in a pot. But Genesis and Harper Martini, goddamn, they were cats and dogs. They were the worst professional experience I ever attained. They both wanted different things. They want this, they want that. I can't do both. Have a whole lot of trouble communicating. I want to keep everybody happy. I couldn't even be happy.
How did Casey react to all this conflict?
Well, I can't say too much all about Casey, but I do recollect one day she came in boiling like a teapot.
Can you tell us about that specific occurrence?
Well, if I dot my I's and cross my T's, I say May 11th, 2019, Genesis and the rest of the gang held a party at Black Bear Casino. I do say so myself. I also had some good times at Black Bear Casino on my day, but different that topic. A few days after the party, Harper pulled out her phone and played this nasty little voicemail that Genesis had left for her. Hello? Oh,
Defense counsel, are you with us? Okay. Does anyone know from defense what happened to counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. It feels my co-counsel is having a bit of internet issues.
Okay. Do we know if she's going to be right back or?
She should be right back. And so has the witness that their internet, I guess, pushed them out as well.
Okay. Depending on how much time you have, defense, would you like to just do your next witness and have them come back later? Or, okay, I see defense counsel has rejoined us. Do we know if the witness has came back? All right, defense counsel, I think you're on mute.
I apologize. I believe Mr. Osborne is also having internet issues.
Okay, no problem. I understand that everyone's different locations, no big deal. Do we know if Mr. Osborne will be right back? Is he trying to join or is his internet down?
Yes, he's trying to join right now.
Okay, if we believe he's coming right back any moment now, we can wait till he comes back, or if not, defense, you can move on to actually, I'd rather him come back right now if he's trying to join.
Yes. I do believe he's going to try and get in a different device, so that might take a moment.
Okay, perfect.
And also, Your Honor, just for the record, we have an hour and 1 minute until all lost time.
Okay, thank you for that. Seems like we're doing pretty good on time. So as long as Mr. Osborne can come back within the hopefully next couple minutes, it seems like we'll have time for full cross, full next witness, and hopefully a little break.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and I did look through the judge's PowerPoint. It says we will pause until Blair Osborne returns.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Do we have any word from Blair Osborne?
Mr. Osborne, he's going to try and call in. Right now, he's still having issues with the internet and trying to connect. I did advise him that he could call in. I just don't think we'll be able to see him.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be fine.
We also have gotten word from TAB that if we do end up getting close to all loss because of the technical difficulties, they are willing to postpone it.
Perfect. Great.
Mr. Osborne, are you here yet? I believe he's almost connected.
Hello? Can y'all hear me?
Yes, Mr. Osborne, you're back up.
I'm so sorry. This little TV thing just like popped out black lights. I thought my suit took all its power or something. I'm so sorry. Apparently my kids tell me that my box over there has bad ping pong or something.
Your Honor, may I proceed with direct examination?
Yes, go ahead, counsel.
Mr. Osborne, we were just talking about the transcript of the voicemail Harper showed Casey. Would you be able to recognize a copy of that?
Oh, yes, I believe so. I will be able to.
At this time, my co-counsel will be displaying what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 8 on the screen for all to view. Mr. Osborne, what is this you're seeing on the screen?
Well, I'll be. Look like this is the transcript between Genesis and Miss Martini.
Is this a fair and accurate copy of this exhibit?
Oh, like that funny juice man says, oh yeah.
Do you believe this will be helpful in supporting your testimony here today?
Well, I hope so. Yeah.
Your Honor, per stipulation 3, Exhibit 8 has already been pre-admitted. Mr. Osborne, can you give us a summary of what Genesis said to Harper in that voicemail?
Sure thing. Let me just close up on it. Well, it says right here, Genesis was telling Harper she's going to take Casey far away from her to Paris. I don't know why you want to go Paris. We got Rapid River Valley. We got all good food here, but whatever. And Harper would die alone and no one will care. Well, ain't fair. I care.
Objection.
It was a terrible
It's
message, I gotta say.
What was the objection to?
The cumulative response defense counsel.
Yes, I believe the witness was about to finish. We can move on, Your Honor.
Okay, yeah, I'm not gonna sustain that. Overruled. Since he's finishing up.
Mr. Osborne, how did Casey react to this?
Well, like I said earlier, she was boiling like a teapot. She was clearly upset after Harper told Casey And I want to quote this best I can. One of these days, Genesis will drink the wrong thing and will kill him. Genesis got up and left the table fuming. I gotta say, this guy, I hope it was just not that serious, because then I mean, I joke around. My dog pukes. I tell him I'm gonna stuff him. I don't mean it.
Mr. Osborne, how did Harper and Genesis' relationship appear as the wedding came closer?
Oh, good heavens. It's like trying to put two ends of a magnet together. It's just not going to go through. It just leave it at that.
Why do you say that?
Well, I remember the afternoon of the wedding rehearsal. Harper and Genesis got into a disagreement. Afterwards, Casey pulled me aside and she told me, "Can you please keep Harper and Genesis apart?" And that was easy, because when two people don't like each other's company, they're going to naturally avoid each other. So I went and put them out here in this room and the other room like a timeout. And that was until the toast, when they started insulting each other, just throwing shade like a ping pong table. I was going like this. I didn't understand what's going on.
When did the bickering between Harper and Genesis stop?
Oh, I must say, during dessert, Harper presented Genesis with the most beautiful bottle of wine, probably more pretty than my 99 Yankees ring. But in front of the entire group, it was a genuine and lovely gift. I gotta tell you, I'm one jolly fellow. I love being happy, but even that kind of topped me. It was a really moving moment that made it clear how much Casey was loved. It felt like Harper really buried that hatchet there. She's like, let's be friends.
What happened after Genesis received the bottle?
Oh, I think I saw her open up that bottle and drink from it. She, at one point, she started pouring another glass of wine. It looked like she was a fish out of water trying to drink some wine.
And when was the
I'm
last
not sure
time
if
you?
that was.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you please finish?
I just wanted to clarify. I don't think anybody else drank. I don't know if somebody else drank it or if she drank it.
When was the next time you saw Genesis alive?
Oh, God bless her soul again. May she rest up in heaven. I gotta say, it was around midnight of the wedding rehearsal. Most of the guests already gone to bed. I was getting ready to tuck her out. Along there at the cocktail station, I saw good old Genesis along with Drew and the angel. They're just talking around.
Were they intoxicated?
Well, I'm not one to say and really guess who they were. Drew seemed happy and relaxed, mostly the tippy. Best for Angel and Genesis, I couldn't really tell how much they had drank, so I can't really tell you.
Now let's move on to the day of the wedding. What happened on the morning of June 8th, 2019?
Well, that dreadful day, I arrived at Peony Station bright and early, trying to get my stuff set up straight for the reception and ceremony. I got to say around 7:15 a.m. That's when I saw Miss Harper Martini. I asked her how she was feeling, and she expressed her desire that she hoped a perfect day for Casey. I could tell Harper loved Casey.
What happened after that?
Counsel response.
Yes, to what specific statement?
Yeah, please clarify, plaintiff counsel.
The statements that Harper elicited, I hope it's a perfect day for Casey.
Okay, defense.
We're only using this for the effect on the listener, not so much for the truth.
Okay, response, plaintiff.
Your Honor, if it's for the effect of the listener, I would ask what effect are they trying to establish and lay the foundation for the effect that they're trying to prove.
Yeah, what's the effect, defense?
How the listener reacted to to Genesis. To Harper Martini saying that wanted a picture perfect moment for Casey.
So this is what I'm going to do. Plaintiff counsel, I'm going to overrule the objection, but if we don't hear the reaction in the next couple of questions, feel free to re-raise the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Osborne, how did you react to Harper telling you this?
Well, I could just tell that from when she told me this, that she really loved Casey, her own daughter. She must have loved her more than life itself.
Objection, speculation.
Response to that, defense?
Your Honor, Mr. Osborne is just stating how he personally believes Harper feels, not so much just based on what he observed.
Yeah, I do think this action qualifies for him to say that. I don't think he's getting too much into the mindset. I'm going to overrule the objection.
I would also like to re-raise my objection to hearsay, as we have not heard of the effect that happened or that occurred.
Yeah, I'm going to sustain the objection. So we're going to strike the quote that Mr. Osborne made earlier from the witness that he was hearing. But we're
Yes,
going to
Your Honor.
overrule
Yes, Your
the
Honor.
speculation. Yep.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Osborne, how do you feel about the allegation that Harper was involved in the poisoning of Genesis Petrillo?
I'm gonna tell you flat out, and for the record, I don't believe it. No amount of evidence you bring in front of me will ever make me believe it that my good friend Miss Martini has done this on purpose. I'm willing to bet my 99 Yankees World Series ring on it. Harper is one of the most kindest and decent people I have ever met.
Objection
Harper
and proper
loved
character evidence.
Response.
Your Honor, Mr. Osborne can testify as to what he believes Harper Martini is based on his involvement with Harper Martini. Mr. Osborne has already established that he has a relationship with Mr. Martini, both personal and business.
Yeah, plaintiff, let me ask, what's the particular character evidence that is being elicited here?
It would have to be, as the witness would say, that Harper Martini is kind. So they're trying to show conformity to wit by saying that if Harper is kind, he would never hurt or do something as to kill Genesis. So that's improper character evidence that they're trying to establish under Rule 404B. I'm sorry, 404.
Yeah. Response one more time, defense.
Your Honor, I believe Mr. Osborne can testify to his rationally based perception.
Yeah, I do think that the witness was just saying that, like, he believes the witness is kind, or Harper Martini is kind. I don't think they're necessarily going into any particular character trait, so I'm going to overrule that.
Yes, Your Honor.
And at this time, Your Honor, I have no further questions for Mr. Osborne, so I pass the witness.
Okay, plaintiff, cross-examine whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. So Blair Osborne, the defendant hired you to plan her daughter's wedding, correct?
Oh, that's what I do, and that's what she called me for.
And during the wedding planning, conflict was all too frequent. Is that correct?
Oh, good heavens, that was the worst playing experience I had in my entire life. Yes. Oh, yes.
As a matter of fact, you believed that the wedding was doomed from the start.
Oh, like that funny juice man says on the TV. Oh, yeah.
Because you can't even remember everything that went wrong in the wedding.
Oh, goodness, let me tell you, Mr. Lawyer person, it was this and that. Can I have this? Can I have that? Nowhere the other. I don't even know who hired the mother trucking Sam Arnold. I ain't hired him. I don't even like the guy.
So is that a yes for my question?
Oh, yeah.
And it was because there was just too much.
Oh, it's too much of everything, too much of drama, too much of the ordering, too much of the yelling, too much of everything. What specifically do you mean? It's too much of everything, too much of me, in my opinion, too.
I'm sorry, is
Hello, did my
Miss
TV
Blair okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so you mentioned a voicemail from the victim. Oh my God. Miss Blair Osborne, you're kind of cutting up for me.
Hey.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Blair Osborne, you're kind of cutting up for me.
You got the ring for that.
Okay, I'm just gonna move on. So you mentioned a voicemail from the victim on direct, correct?
I did mention that, yes. Well, they did.
And as you mentioned, the defendant said in response to the voicemail, one of these days, Genesis is gonna drink the wrong thing. Is that correct?
Just the same thing. Like when my dog vomits, I tell him, you vomit one more time, you're gonna become a stuffed animal.
So taking you back to my question, is that a yes?
Oh yeah,
And the defendant also said that it will kill Genesis.
I believe so. Yeah.
So you were at the rehearsal dinner, correct?
Oh yes, I planned it, so I gotta attend and make sure everything goes crystal clear.
And you heard the defendant gift the bottle of card to Genesis, correct?
Oh, I saw my own two beautiful eyes.
Yes, and you also heard the defendant tell the victim not to open this bottle in front of other people.
Well, I gotta say it's probably because that bottle is very expensive, probably more expensive than my 99 Yankee ring. So I'm sure she didn't want nobody
Mr.
stealing
Blair,
it.
Mr. Blair, Mr. Blair, is that a yes to my question?
Oh yes, I heard that.
And you heard the defendant say, I want this special bottle to be just for you. Is that correct?
I did hear that. That's correct.
And the defendant told the victim that this bottle was for when you have a private moment to reflect on everything you have done.
Oh well, who doesn't drink a bottle of wine a night to reflect on the day? I know I do after a hard day at work.
So taking you back to my question, is that a yes, Mr. Blair?
Yes, Mr. Lawyer Person.
Okay. No more questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
Okay. Any redirect from the defense?
No redirect, Your Honor. May this witness be excused.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time, Mr. Osborne.
Well, thank
Right.
you.
And defense, you can call your
Defense calls Dr. Cannon to the stand.
welcome, Dr. Cannon, and defense, you can proceed whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Mr. Cannon. Can you state your name for the court?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. My name is Dr. Ryan Cannon.
And Dr. Cannon, can you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
Of course, I received my bachelor's degree in chemistry from the Ohio State University, go Buckeyes. And later on, I attended Harvard Medical School and received my MD with an emphasis in toxicology.
And what did you do after you graduated?
Yeah, after graduation, I worked at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston for a couple of years, and then I went on to work as a professor. I'm here at the medical school here in Midlands, and now I am currently working for Gardner Consulting.
And what do you do at Gardner Consulting?
I am an associate consultant, and I really like working here. I get to meet new people and work on evaluating medical records for cases and things like that. And one of our most important clients is actually Dead Ski Roach and Rodent Killer.
And have you ever testified in court before?
Yes, I have testified a total of 35 cases, and 30 of those were criminal, if I remember correctly, and only 5 were civil.
Okay, and how did you become involved in today's case?
I became involved in this case after the defendant's attorneys asked me to be a consultant because of my prior knowledge in toxicology. And more specifically, I was hired to assess the results and tests and findings of Dr. Kwan.
Okay, and are you being paid for your services today?
Yes, I am being paid a flat rate fee. However, I want to know I'm not being paid to testify. I was only paid for my services of reviewing records and as a consultant and to provide my professional opinion.
And is this amount being paid fairly normal?
Yes, it is.
Did you receive any documents for today's case?
Yes, I did, which I viewed the exhibits of Dr. Kwan's reports along with Angel Rodriguez's affidavit, but I did not speak to anybody about the case prior and did not examine Patrio's body.
And how did you review these documents?
I reviewed them thoroughly and used them to draw my conclusions. It's a pretty common method known as RIC, review, analyze, and conclude. And it's widely accepted amongst the consulting community.
And were these documents enough to come to conclusions for the reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes, for this, I made sure to go over everything thoroughly and conduct my own research as appropriate, and I came up with as many conclusions as possible.
And are these principles and methods used widely accepted to your field?
Yes, as I said earlier, these methods refer to RIC, review, analyze, and conclude, and it's extremely common in the field of consulting, especially since we're reviewing documents and the work of others.
Do you believe your testimony will be helpful to the jury to present the facts in today's case?
Yes.
And after you completed your report, did you arrive at any conclusions?
Yes, I did arrive at some conclusions. Dr. Kwan accurately conducted the Petrio's mechanism of death, and there's no reason to doubt to the conclusion that Dr. Kwan came in regards to the cause of death.
Improper.
Sorry, pause for a minute. Do we have an objection, plaintiff?
Yes, an objection for improper opinion.
Under defense, what's your? Sorry, go ahead, plaintiff.
Yes, this is an expert witness, and he is allowed to reply or base his facts on his prior expertise, and he's laid all the foundation, the proper foundation.
Okay, plaintiff, what particular element do you think that this witness has not satisfied?
Well, under Rule 702D, the witness failed to establish that they were able to reliably apply their principles and methods to the facts of today's case in coming to a conclusion.
Okay, response, plaintiff or defense?
Yes, this witness is simply just like he laid down the proper foundation from his, or I can just lay the proper foundation in order for him to have reached this.
Yep.
So I'll re-ask.
That'd be great. So we want to establish 702D. So why don't we establish that? For now, I'm going to sustain the objection, plaintiff. And go ahead, feel free to ask and lay.
Were you able to apply these methods reliably to this case, Dr. Cannon?
Yes, I was. I was able to go ahead and apply my process of reviewing, analyzing, and then coming up with a conclusion from the reports provided by Dr. Kwan and the other facts of the case that I reviewed.
Okay, like you mentioned, you came to conclusions. Can you tell us how many conclusions you arrived at?
Arrived at a total of 4, yes.
Okay, can you describe the symptoms Genesis had?
Yes, I can go ahead and Genesis had nausea, vomiting, slurred speech, and stomach pain along with slowed breathing. And this is, this is typically associated with my first conclusion of alcohol poisoning.
And what were the other conclusions you came up with?
The other conclusions I came up with are an allergic reaction, and there is the potential for hepatic disease or chronic liver disease, and the final being that the pesticide entered Petrio's system via some other medium other than the consumption of wine.
And what type of testing did Dr. Kwan do on Genesis?
He took samples of Genesis's blood and her blood alcohol content, or BAC, which came out to be 0.16.
I see you mentioned BAC. Can you describe to the court what specifically that is?
Yes. BAC, as I said, it stands for blood alcohol concentration or content, which measures the levels of alcohol consumption.
Your Honor, may I display what has been pre-marked at Exhibit 23 on the screen for all to view?
Yep, yeah, you don't have to ask, but if it hasn't been entered already, just ask whenever you're about to enter it in evidence.
Dr. Cannon, can you describe what you are seeing on the screen?
Yes, I see an impairment chart. Yes.
Time.
Is this a fair?
Both timekeepers agree that time has elapsed at this point.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah.
Okay, I will allow just one more question, and then that will be it from this witness. So, defense, please, just one more question.
What could have this meant for the plaintiff?
Essentially, it can be speculated because it had been so long for that. Since Jen Petrillo had drank and anything, that their blood alcohol content was actually much higher than was originally reported upon Dr. Kwan's report.
Okay, thank you. No further questions, Your Honor. Pass this witness.
All right, plaintiff, you are free to cross-examine whenever ready.
Dr. Cannon, you never met Genesis Petrillo, correct?
That is correct, yes.
You never spoke to Harper Martini?
No, I just spoke with her legal team, yes.
You didn't even examine the body?
No, ma'am, that's typical in the field of consulting, so you're right.
You only examined documents, that's correct?
That is correct.
You mentioned on direct examination that you think Miss Petrillo could have died from alcohol poisoning, is that correct?
Yes, that is one of my conclusions that I came to.
Talking about the alcohol poisoning, that does not explain the pesticide that was found in the victim's stomach contents, as that was your fourth conclusion, correct?
That is, yes.
But alcohol poisoning does not explain the pesticide that was found in the victim's blood, is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Alcohol poisoning does not explain the pesticide that was found in the victim's blood.
Yes, as I said earlier, that is correct.
And it's highly unlikely that the victim died of alcohol poisoning, correct?
It is likely, however, it is not guaranteed because, again, like you said, it isn't explained by everything else that was present.
You would agree that the respiratory arrest is the most likely cause of death?
Yes.
And you would agree that pesticide poisoning is the most likely cause of Petrillo's death?
Yes, but again, there's no certain way to determine which medium that pesticide entered the system through.
You would agree that the wine produced by Harper Martini is the most likely cause of the pesticide poisoning?
That is the most likely. However, that does not mean that it is in fact the cause of death.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, and defense, do you rest at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense rests its case in chief.
Perfect. And can anyone tell me when is all loss?
I believe it's still at 12:55 for us.
5. Okay, so we should have time for a 5-minute break if it's at 12:55. So is everyone good with a 5-minute break and being back by 12:34?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so not sure if everyone's in Central Time, but be back at 34 wherever you're at. All right, we'll take a break. All righty, it is now 12:34, so we will proceed with closing arguments. First, we'll hear from the plaintiff, and plaintiff, I will assume whatever you have left, you may use for rebuttal if you choose, and you may proceed when ready.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. On June 7th, at a wedding rehearsal, the defendant, armed with a bottle of pesticides, stepped into the kitchen where a bottle of Cara wine was waiting. The defendant poisoned that bottle. The defendant walked in with pesticides and walked out with wine. That same evening, the defendant gave a toast and gifted that bottle of poisoned wine to Genesis Petrillo. Genesis drank that wine and died. It's for this reason that the estate of Genesis Petrillo has brought a complaint of battery against the defendant. Now, it's your job as the jury to answer this question, while it is our job as the plaintiff to prove it to you. We had to prove to you the three elements of battery. Number one, that the defendant acted. Two, that the defendant did so with an intent to cause harmful or offensive contact. And number three, that harmful or offensive contact occurred. Members of the jury, what does that mean in today's case? We had to prove to you that the defendant gave Genesis poisoned wine, that the defendant did so intending to harm Genesis, and that Genesis was harmed. We had to prove all this to you, members of the jury, by a preponderance of the evidence. We needed to prove to you that more likely than not, the defendant committed battery. And members of the jury, we have met our burden. So let's review all the evidence that we brought today to help you find the truth. The defendant's first approach in dealing with Genesis was not to poison her. In fact, the defendant had three plans in mind, and members of the jury, remembering these plans is as simple as A, B, C. Plan A, antagonize. Plan B, bribe. Plan C, Cara. Let's take these in turn as we consider the months, weeks, days, and hours that led up to the wedding rehearsal where the defendant walked in with poison, walked out with wine. Plan A, antagonize. To start with, the defendant antagonized Genesis. She used her words to try to get Genesis out of the picture. Just consider some of these things that the defendant said to Genesis. First, the defendant said, "Leave and save this family a headache. Otherwise, I will make you disappear." Or how about when the defendant said, "Whether you stay with Casey, move off to France, or end up 6 feet under, I don't care." Their own witnesses, the defendant and Mr. Osborne, along with our witnesses, Angel Rodriguez and Katie C. Soto, all took the stand today and testified to the hostile relationships and the constant fighting between the defendant and the victim. What does all this mean, members of the jury? The defendant tried to use her words. She tried to antagonize Genesis to get her out of the picture, but Genesis was still there. So the defendant moved on to Plan B. Plan B was bribe. In court today, we saw this note that appeared in an envelope, and enclosed in that envelope was a check for $300,000. Members of the jury, the defendant attempted to bribe the victim to get her out of the picture. And as the note said, if Genesis had not left by the 7th, the defendant would take her out of the picture the hard way. Well, the 7th rolled around, the night of the wedding rehearsal, and not only was Genesis still there, She threw that note in the face of the defendant. So the defendant moved on to plan C, which was Kara. That evening at the wedding rehearsal, the defendant yanked Genesis into the hall to have a word, after which Genesis said, "I'm afraid that Harper is going to kill me." Later that evening, Angel Rodriguez testified that the defendant, armed with a canister of pesticides, on her way to the kitchen said, "These pesticides are for Genesis because Genesis is such a pest." Members of the jury, the defendant confessed. When she was in that kitchen, the defendant did exactly what she said she was going to do. She took the pesticides, she put them in that bottle of Cara wine, and later that evening at a toast, she gave that bottle of wine to Genesis with the instructions to drink it when she had a moment alone to think about everything that she had done. Genesis drank that wine, and only Genesis drank that wine. And as the doctor who took the stand today, Dr. Kwan, testified, it is because Genesis drank that wine that she died from pesticide poisoning. Members of the jury, after hearing from all the witnesses today something that the defendant said just doesn't add up, at what point did the defendant know that Genesis had been poisoned? When I asked the defendant if she thought Genesis had been rushed to the hospital, she answered yes and no. What she really meant, members of the jury, was yes, she did think that Genesis had been rushed to the hospital because she knew that Genesis had been rushed to the hospital. Consider what Angel Rodriguez told us, that before she had a chance to tell the defendant anything about Genesis being sick, much less mention poison, the defendant said, "Genesis has been poisoned? Oh no, guess we'll have to cancel the wedding." It's because the defendant knew, because the defendant did it. In a few minutes, the defense will come up here and tell you that the defendant had full hands and a full heart. Members of the jury, when they say these words, I would like you to remember that the defendant's hands were full of pesticide, and her heart was full of rage. The defendant walked in with poison, walked out with wine. The defendant brought some stories today, stories about the defendant and her family. Members of the jury, we're not here to discuss stories today. We're here to discuss facts. This is about justice for Genesis. This was Genesis. She died on the morning of her wedding, and we proved to you that it was because the defendant committed battery. In a minute, you'll have a chance to go back to a room and deliberate, to look over all the facts. We ask that you find the defendant, Harper Martini, liable for battery. Thank you.
All right, thank you, counsel. Defense, you can do your closing argument whenever ready.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, Harper Martini had full hands and a full heart. Only one thing was proven by the plaintiff in today's case, and it's that Genesis Petrillo died on June 8, 2019. They wanted you to believe that Harper Martini intentionally mixed in pesticide into a bottle of wine with the intent to cause harm onto Genesis. But members of the jury, they did not meet their burden of proof. Now, before going any further, I want to explain the law at play in this trial for you guys to have a better understanding of what exactly has to be proved by the plaintiff today. The plaintiff had to prove to you today that it's more likely than not that Harper Martini killed Genesis Petrillo. Now, there are three elements they had to prove in order to meet that burden. The first element they had to prove was that an act was committed by Harper Martini. The second element they had to prove was that Harper Martini intended to cause harmful contact onto Genesis. And the third element they had to prove was that as a result of Harper Martini's actions, Genesis was harmed. Now, members of the jury, they did not prove a single one of these elements here today. Today, the plaintiff walked in and tried and told you that Harper Martini walked in with poison and walked out with a bottle of wine. But what they didn't tell you was that other people also had access to this pesticide. Other people also had access to this wine cellar. Other people also had access to this bottle of wine. I heard from both Angel and Casey that Genesis Petrillo was not a stranger to the consumption of large amounts of alcohol. You heard Angel say that they've gotten drunk a lot. And you heard Casey say that it wasn't strange to see Genesis pour herself 2 glasses of wine just for herself. You also heard from Dr. Kwan, who also stated that Genesis Petrillo initially came in as an alcohol poisoning case. Now, members of the jury, we can stop here. I can turn off my camera and stop, because the law requires you to find Harper Martini not liable simply because the plaintiff failed to meet their burden of proof. But we didn't stop here. We presented our own evidence because Harper Martini had full hands and a full heart. And today you heard from Dr. Cannon, a medical doctor who's an expert in both the areas of toxicology and pharmacology, and he told you that he came up with 4 different conclusions that Genesis could have died, one of them being alcohol poisoning. And you also heard from Blair Osborne, who was active in the planning of the wedding rehearsal and had a business relationship between Peony Estates and a personal relationship with Harper Martini. You heard from him about the work Harper was putting into Casey's wedding, about how she had her hands full in order to make Casey happy. Blair also saw Genesis drinking the night away with her friends right before she left the venue. Finally, Harper Martini took the stand, and Harper Martini and Genesis Petrillo didn't have the best relationship. We can't deny that. They had their bad moments, but despite this, Harper Martini was willing to set aside her personal feelings for the sake of Casey. Harper Martini told you that the only thing she loved the most aside from her winery was Casey. Because for Harper Martini, Casey was what filled her heart. Members of the jury, why would Harper throw away everything she had just to get rid of one person? The only thing Harper loved more than her business was Casey. And if Harper had wanted to get rid of Genesis, that would be like getting rid of Casey. Now, you have to ask yourself this question: why would Harper Martini want to get rid of Casey, the one thing she found precious in her life? Members of the jury, you also heard today from Angel Rodriguez that she waited and waited until it was too late. By the time Casey arrived to the hospital, Genesis had already passed away. You also heard from Dr. Kwan, who administered an antidote for organophosphate poisoning right before she received the toxicology reports. Members of the jury, let me remind you all of the burden of proof that the plaintiff had to prove to you here today. They had to prove by the preponderance of the evidence that Harper Martini killed Genesis Petrillo. And in order to do so, they had to prove 3 elements. Well, the law says they must prove all 3 in order to prevail. And the plaintiff didn't prove any of these elements. And because they failed to meet this burden, you must find Harper Martini not liable. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, defense counsel. How much time is left for rebuttal?
19 seconds.
Okay, perfect. So we'll have a very quick rebuttal, plaintiff counsel.
May it please the court. Other people had access to the wine cellar, but only Harper Martini had a motive. Hands full of pesticides and a heart full of rage. Members of the jury, we have met our burden today, so we ask that you find the defendant liable for battery. Thank you.
All right. Thank you to you all. Give us just just a few minutes. We've been scoring as we go, like we should. So to give us just a few minutes to finish up ranks and these last scores, and we'll be back for some brief comments. All right, guys, we are done with our ballots. And now for some brief comments. First, just to introduce ourselves, my name's Brandon Cooper. I'm a management consultant for a firm in the Dallas area. I did mock trial all 4 years in college for Baylor, got to compete at nationals my freshman year, attorney and witness, team captain, all that stuff. So really love mock trial, really like being here to empower and help out the next generation of really killer public speakers and attorneys. So really enjoy what y'all do, and I'm very glad to be here. I'm going to give just some brief overall comments. First, because this might be your last tournament of the semester, and I'm guessing y'all are all going to split up and restack and everything. So I know that individually your roles are probably going to change and might not all be that useful, but I'm gonna give some overall comments about what you can do just everyone from a mock trial perspective and to use this virtual format better. First of all, just mock trial in general, make sure to be responsive to the judge's instructions and to the rulings. For example, in the beginning, I said, never ask me before displaying something on the screen. That was generally followed pretty well with just a few exceptions. So just make sure you always take into consideration what the judge says with regard to instructions. And then second of all, whenever it comes to objections, make sure you don't re-ask an objectionable statement, or in particular what happened in this case, if I overrule an objection, make sure to get the content out. I think it was the very first witness on cross-examination or something like that. I overruled an objection made by the plaintiff to the defense, and we never actually got the content that the witness was going to say. I think it was a defense attorney, you just moved on, but I overruled your objection. So we didn't actually get to hear what the witness had to say that I was going to allow. So always make sure to pay attention. If I overrule an objection, make sure to re-ask the question. Even if the content did get out, I suggest re-asking it again so you can pound that information into the jury's head. Something I would suggest is for everyone is to be more conversational. What I mean by that is to sound less scripted. And a good way to do that is to pause before you ask a question and to pause before you give an answer if you're a witness. In real life, you're not going to be asked a question and immediately be able to rattle out whatever it is you're going to say. You pause to think about what was just asked, or if you're an attorney, you pause to think about what was just said before you ask another question. So it's one easy way to sound more conversational and more realistic instead of just quickly running through the script that you have. Whenever it comes to objections, make sure you pick your battles correctly. This round had plenty of objections, which is great. I think there was actually a good amount. There wasn't too many and there weren't too few objections. But with that being said, make sure you only object to things that are going to be super important for your case. And also things like you shouldn't make a hearsay objection when you know the statement is an opposing party statement. At this point, I know everyone here is a talented attorney. You all know the rules of evidence, and your judge knows the rules of evidence too. You're not going to trick anyone by making a hearsay objection to something that is a statement of the opposing party. That's just an easy response for opposing counsel. They're not going to miss it. And even if they did miss it, I'd personally think it was kind of mean if you were keeping out opposing party statements. So don't ever do things like that. If it's super obvious that it's going to get overruled, it just seems a little mean. It seems a little bit just like a waste of time. Whenever it comes to demos, which I think are incredibly important in this new virtual format, it's really easy for judges to get sidetracked and to zone out and really to get bored because we don't have your presence in front of us like we usually do. So I recommend having demos like throughout the entirety of trial. I'm talking like openings, if that's allowed, throughout each witness, maybe even some on cross, and definitely in closing. Closer is just an example of something you can do. You can bring up whatever the statute is. I know AMTA usually doesn't give jury instructions anymore, unfortunately, but you can bring up the statute of like what battery is. And for example, if you're the plaintiff closer, you could be like, members of the jury, this is the first element of battery. And for this element, you should say, yes, we have met that. And then you can explain why. For element 2, yes, we have met this. And likewise, on the defense, you could have just a little blow up of what the charges are and say, didn't hear that today, didn't hear that today, didn't hear that today. So demos are a really easy way to keep the audience engaged, even before all this virtual stuff. Juries love the demos. So that's super important whenever it comes to keeping everyone engaged. Likewise, I saw plaintiff closer, you hold up a piece of paper in your closing, and that was cool, but I think it'd be even cooler if you just had your co-counsel bring it up on the screen real quick, because it was really bad what was in that note for the other side, and it was really effective getting those quotes out, but just because of the way cameras work and everything, I couldn't really see what was actually on that paper, even though you were telling us, it worked out fine. But just a note for the future, it'd be cool if we actually got some screen share in the close going on. And along with keeping people engaged, I really recommend just everyone having energy throughout the entirety of the trial. I really appreciate whenever I see characters actually get into character mode. I really appreciate from the attorneys whenever you're not all super bland and everyone talks with some variation in their tone and their pitch. And I like to see smiles just to see that, everyone's happy to be here and that everyone's having fun. But those are all the negative things. I do congratulate you all for getting through this tournament. I wish you all the best of luck. And now I will pass over the comments to my co-judge.
Yeah, okay, so just to introduce myself, my name is Elizabeth. I am also a Baylor mock trial alum. After graduation, I did it all through my undergraduate, and then after graduation, I have since moved to Washington, D.C., where I work at the Embassy of Afghanistan. I don't think Brandon asked, where are you guys from? Like, where are the schools?
We're from UT Arlington.
Okay, and the plaintiff?
We're UT Dallas.
Okay, nice. Well, I think it was very clear that you guys were all very prepared. You knew your material, so congratulations on that. Thank you for putting in the work. It makes it a lot easier for us to watch when we're watching prepared teams. So I've definitely appreciated that and want to congratulate you on all of the work you've put in thus far. Let's go through some specific comments I have. Like Brandon, I want to echo the fact that you guys need to be using demos throughout. Technology is really, really cool, and we can do some really cool things. You can have really interesting charts or tables or demonstratives that you can use in your opening, in your witness statements, and in your closings, and I want to see them more often. It makes it so much more engaging for us as judges to be able to see something actually happening on a screen, right? And it just makes it more interesting for us to be here and to see actually what's going on. Let's see. Big overarching thing that I have for both teams is that I didn't really see a very clear case theory throughout. Right, so we had some really interesting stories that we told in our openings and in our closings, but we didn't exactly carry those same stories throughout the witness statements, right? So every single question in your directs, every single question in your crosses should be going to proving this specific case theory or proving this specific theory or story that you are saying is happening. We had a lot of things that didn't exactly have an impact on the claims that you were making or didn't really seem to contribute to the charge of battery, right? We have to remember that while it is fun to sit here and talk to each other and hang out on Zoom for 3 hours, we do have a goal with what we're doing. So it's important that you and your attorneys and your witnesses recognize what that goal is, identify the most important points that you're going to get out of every single one of your witnesses, and then make sure that every question you have goes to one of those points. Also use your themes more. I did not hear your themes in your witness statements, and I should have. I heard them a little bit I heard them mostly in your openings and a tiny bit in your closings, but I did not hear them in your witness statements at all. And each of your witnesses should be going along with, right, proving that case theory, should be proving that theme and making sure that it stays fresh in your jury and in your judges' minds. Along those same lines, make sure you have a goal with your cross, right? Choose 2 to 3 points that really help your case theory, make them, and then leave, right? There's no point to hash out every bad thing that's in the affidavit or go through every terrible thing that this witness has ever done. Just choose your most important points and move on. And then a last thing, I think Judge Cooper also brought this up, is I want the witnesses to pay more attention to what's actually happening, right? You guys, I have imagined, right, the witnesses have, even though they are witnesses and not attorneys, have sat through enough of mock trial at this point in this semester to understand what the objection battles are about and what they're talking about, right? So if you know that the judge has just overruled or has just sustained a hearsay objection against you, don't bring up the same hearsay statement when you re-answer that same question. Does that make any sense at all? Like, you're supposed to help out your attorneys. I know you're not an attorney, so you don't have to know the rules as well, even though you definitely should be familiar with them. But if you know that this particular piece of information has already been objected to and sustained against, then don't bring it up again, because you're just going to get objected to and sustained against once more. And you don't want to give your attorneys that headache. Those are my major points. Yeah, so clear case theory, use your demos, and witnesses need to pay more attention. That's what I have for you guys. But like I said, you all did fantastic. And I have individual comments for everyone that I submitted to Tab Room. So if you want to look at those as well.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for this round. This was very good. This was probably my favorite round to judge this weekend. And I wish you all the best of luck in the award ceremony. It looks like we are good to leave right now. I think the ballots have been tabulated. So very much appreciate you guys, and best of luck.
And Mrs. Judge,
Thank you.
fine people.